Joining us on the program is the man behind the Music and Scare package, the soundtrack of which is available now via Lakeshore Records on all major digital platforms. He's a talented musician, composer, and all-around swell gentleman whose musical stylings are featured, with his express permission, littered all throughout this podcast. He is Alex Cuervo. Alex, thank you so much for being on here with us.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here. I could do the NPR "Good to be with you."
There you go.
Well, it feels like we should have had you on earlier, given how much you've generously donated your musical talents to us.
Oh, it was in quarantine. I had some free time. It was no big deal.
So before we jump in, we usually like to ask the guest what gave them the bug for their chosen profession. But beyond just music with you, I kind of want to know, like, what was the thing, what was the movie, what was the TV show or the piece of pop culture that got you, a guy who I can safely say is kind of into the macabre and oddities and spooky shit in general. What got you into it initially?
Into film music?
No, just beyond that, like your taste of, I guess it's a two-pronger. What got you into just kind of genre stuff in general and then into film as well?
Honestly, I guess the through line was being a heavy metal kid in 8th grade, finding skateboarding, which led me to punk rock, which led me to like goth and horror and stuff like that in high school. So it was kind of through music that I arrived at genre, film, and pop culture stuff. It all kind of happened around the same time, but, heavy metal, punk rock, and then just like Night Flight and, just anything I could get my hands on in El Paso, Texas in the 80s,
What were some of your favorite bands that you were listening to then?
In high school, oh gosh. I mean, like the Misfits, that was a really huge band. One of the first, and horror is such a component in that band. So, they reference a lot of old movies and stuff. And so I would go, being a good fan, I would go kind of, look up all the references and stuff like that, like Plan 9 from Outer Space and, the weird stuff like that. What other bands? Let's see. I mean, the Ramones have always been dear to my heart. It's a long list, and I couldn't give you.
It's kind of a cruel question for a musician, right?
Yeah, it kind of is, because I mean, if you like help put a gun to my head and say like, what are your 5 favorite? If you had to name 5, they'd be kind of all over the map. But the Ramones would be in there, Black Sabbath, maybe Devo, Susie and the Banshees. I don't know. I couldn't do it. I'd get shot.
You mentioned so kind of heavy metal and punk all led you into horror. Did scoring film music come just kind of naturally out of that? Was it also, finding your way into like Carpenter scores or Goblin or Tangerine Dream or even something like that? Or was it more?
Those scores kind of stuck out to me later. Probably the first time I can remember like really noticing like the music in a film would be probably like Badalamenti and David Lynch stuff. Was the first time I was like, oh, this music, oh my God, it's so, transcendent. And then I guess that sort of began my interest in film music. That may be one of the earliest ones that I can recall. And I liked a lot of, as I was getting older, like closer to my 20s, I was starting to get into a lot of experimental and industrial music, which is just really textured and kind of noisy and, stuff like Throbbing Gristle or Current 93 or just weird sort of abstract music. And that kind of subculture also had some people like Scraping Fetus Off the Wheel, who's a guy that goes by J.G. Thirlwell, who's done the music for like Venture Brothers and stuff like that. He was a really kind of filmic music early influence. That was somebody whose music made me think about like, wow, I would love to make like this like kind of filmic instrumental music someday. But it took me, 20 years after that before I got serious about it.
Did you play any instruments growing up? Like, did you do like school band?
I was in punk rock bands when I was in high school. I sang for a bunch of bands. I played drums very poorly. And then later on, I moved to LA in the early 90s and started playing drums again, pretty badly. But I started playing bass. I guess by like the mid 90s, I was playing bass, and by then I was playing in bands pretty regularly. And then I started touring and recording in bands as a bass player. And then I learned other instruments from there. But that was kind of the first instrument I played with some sort of competence.
Do you have any really cool band names that you were in?
Oh, yeah. Like the first band I was in high school was called Zombie Chest Cold. I mean, that's some 16-year-olds from El Paso right there. Twisted Thought, that was another goofy name. I was in some bands later that ended up I was in a band called Ulceration for a while and a band called Hate Face when I lived in LA, which were both kind of metal-y noise rock bands that actually became that metal band Fear Factory. A lot of the guys
Oh.
left that band to become, so Dino and Bert from Fear Factory were in those bands. Let's see. I mean, there's been a lot of bands. And I think after that, from that point on, the names get better.
I want to see some visualizations to Zombie Chest Cold.
Oh, I think I have some drawings in a file folder here in my office somewhere.
On a floppy disk or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, unlike those big, like 4.5 inch or 3.5 inch jobs.
So El Paso, kind of an unassuming town to a lot of people who've never passed through it. Is it a little bit of a counterculture there, like SLC punk, showed Salt Lake City had, or were you fell into that crowd?
No, El Paso had a pretty good, I mean, a small but pretty thriving punk scene because of its geographical location. It's like right between, Dallas and like Phoenix, or like anybody going from Texas to like Los Angeles has to go through El Paso. So like Black Flag and like all the big great punk bands played there. I saw, like my first punk show ever was Suicidal Tendencies in like 1987 in a barn just outside of the city limits, in like a big metal barn. And it was incredibly violent. There was a huge skinhead problem back then because there's an army base there in El Paso, Fort Bliss. So there was a pretty big skinhead gang. And that show in particular brought a lot of kind of cholos out. And so it was like my first punk show, but it was like weirdly more violent than they tended to be there. So I kind of got off on the wrong foot with it, I was kind of freaked out by it having that be my first show, but I kept going, and shows were a lot more chill than that particular one.
How old did you say you were at that time?
Oh, I was probably like 16 or 17 years old.
Now, did your parents take well to not only you wanting to possibly be a musician, you said that might have come later, but just that you found your way into that scene? Were they supportive from the get-go, or did it take a while to convince them?
Being an older Gen Xer, you can imagine my parents were not keen on my mode of dress. They got used to it, as I got older and I started getting tattoos and stuff like that. But yeah, it was pretty, you stuck out like a sore thumb in the 80s being a punk kid in El Paso.
I can imagine.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, kind of going back to the connection with genre, was you hear a lot of people also say that horror movies are kind of the punk rock of film, right?
Yeah.
And that they're kind of like the counterculture. They're, often using the genre to criticize social mores or challenge socio-political belief systems. So, not only were a lot of, punk and metal bands often referencing other horror films and kind of general macabre stuff, but I think that there's a really strong alignment there and kind of this culture around, misfits and outsiders kind of enjoying or like finding some form of a like refuge in this very dark subject matter.
Yes, for sure. I definitely see a lot of parallels with in the horror film community. Absolutely. It's people that, are kind of live on the fringes, are just sort of outcast a little bit. Just the weird kids. The weird kids kind of congregate to each other whenever they have an opportunity to.
Yes, that explains my upbringing, I guess. So going back to how you transitioned to music for film, can you talk a little bit about how you started to, maybe lean away from making music with yourself or with other band members to, the art of crafting music for film?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm 49 right now, and when I turned 40, I'd been working in advertising, doing graphic design related work for the last 20 years leading up to that. And I was kind of coming to the point where it's like, I get one go at this. I really want to work on film. I really want to work in film. It's something that I would love to participate in. I really want to do something creatively bigger than I'm capable of doing by myself and bigger than a band. Films are a very large collaboration guided by one or two people. But it was really appealing to me to participate in something bigger, And at the time I was kind of at a crossroads. I didn't know how I was going to do that. And I'd considered going to school and learning editing because I love editing. I think it's a dark art. It's so cool to me. And I gave it a lot of thought. I'd considered it. And then I kind of came back to, I've spent most of my adult life playing in bands and playing music. I guess it would be kind of stupid to walk away from that. Maybe I should just kind of parlay those skills into this other thing and start pursuing film music. I love film music. I listen to soundtracks. Maybe that's what need to do. So, I enrolled and I started reading music theory books and got serious about learning, orchestration and the sort of skills that you need, to do that, and took online film scoring classes and stuff like that. And it took a while to kind of get going, but having been in advertising for that period of time, I was very fortunate in that I knew a lot of people in the ad industry. So I started working pretty soon into it with my contacts from advertising. I started working on, online promotions and stuff like that. And I started doing music for clients, client-driven music. And that was a really good way to get my feet wet, writing music to someone else's specifications. And that is what I did. I've been doing, pretty much since then, full time. I'd say probably the last 7 or 8 years, I've been doing nothing but music full time. There was a transitional period where I was doing some freelance graphic stuff, but it's been pretty much all music for a while now.
Very cool. Kind of curious, what are some of the challenges maybe for a musician? You're talking about transitioning from creating music that stands on its own versus a collaboration versus creating it for basically to accompany another piece of art. Did you find that a challenge, or is it kind of a...
It is a challenge, but it's part of what's the appeal of it is when you write music, when you're writing music for yourself, sometimes you get that blank page paralysis, where you're just like, when you can do anything, you sometimes just do nothing because it's analysis paralysis, right?
Yeah.
But when you write music to someone else's specification, they give you a very specific framework, and film music, has to achieve a lot of things within a finite period of time. And there's some certain tentpole moments that you have to hit along the way. And so it's kind of cool because it lets you outline what the piece of music is going to be before you write a single note. And so then you're just writing to that kind of framework. And for me, I find that it's kind of liberating. And also limitations, I think, push creativity big time, because you have to work within this rigid amount of time, or if the director's trying to convey a specific thing, you have to work to that. So you're not like anything goes. You're working to someone else's specification. And I find it really helpful.
Right. I guess it kind of plays into what you said about having an editor's brain a bit. You're given not a blank piece of paper. You're given something that you can jumble up and have the ebbs and flows and beats,
Yeah.
Might
and
be
it's
easier
kind
to
of
go.
collage. Like you're bringing your sensibilities, like you're brought in because, this guy's I like this music that he likes. We have a lot of overlap here. Aaron and I talk about this a lot. We don't like all the same stuff, but we overlap a lot stylistically when it comes to music. And so it's easy to kind of find commonality between us. It's great. I have good relationships with some directors where it's really, this guy, Steve Daniels, that I've done work with is really cool because he's an old guy that was into punk rock around the same time, got into it around the same time. And so we have all these obscure things that we can reference when we're working on things. And it's a lot of fun. It's really cool to just kind of bullshit about that kind of stuff with somebody that's as old as you are or approaching as old as you are.
Right. And speaking of Aaron and of Paper Street, how did you first get involved with the group?
Oh, I just straight up I do this spectrostatic, this kind of electronic sort of filmic instrumental band that I've been doing for a really long time. And after I put out, I think around the time I put out the second album, I saw Paper Street and Aaron on Twitter, being an Austin filmmaker, and I saw he was doing horror, and I looked at his stuff, and I was like, man, this guy seems cool, and this is a cool operation. I just sent him a message on Twitter like, hey, man, I'm also in Austin, and this is some stuff I do, and I sent him my music, and he listened to it, and he came back, and he was like, man, that stuff's really cool. I'd love to talk to you, and that kind of led to us working on a couple small, some Fantastic Best bumpers and stuff like that. And then I did, that short film, and it just grew from there. But yeah, I mean, now we're conjoined practically in this.
Hey, we're all happy to have you. And yes, full-fledged soundtrack to Scare Package out now, like I said, on Lakeshore Records, which is very exciting. So we'll play some bits in this episode. We'll link to it as well in the show notes.
Cool.
That's really awesome. The story of kind of connecting with Aaron, and I think as I've been listening to kind of your journey from, working in graphic design to, considering different paths in filmmaking from editing, and then, kind of realizing at one point, like, hey, I need to pursue the things that I love. And really, you only got one chance really to go after your passions. And you kind of have to put yourself out there a bit to do it. And it takes a lot of courage, right, to take those steps. And so it's just really awesome to hear stories like that where you're like, I just reached out and said, hey, I'm here, I want to do these things. And more I hear from people, they frequently give the advice of just let people know that you're interested, or put yourself out there, put it into the universe.
you do have to. But before I'd even approached Aaron, I'd spent years working on instrumental music. Like I had a couple years worth of instrumental music that I'd been working on to share with him. You know what I mean? I'd put in a lot of, you got to do the time, you got to put in the work. But yeah, put in the work, do it, and you get better at it too, because you look back at your early stuff and you're like, oh God, that was garbage. Like I've come a long way. So I think it's important. The only advice I would give somebody that wanted to do this is, like, find your voice, like find how you approach this, what your sensibilities are, and put in a lot of time into kind of crafting that, and then present that to somebody. Don't waste people's time with like, well, I think I could do this, right? Like prove to yourself what you're capable of first, and then approach people with that. But really, put in the time. But then, you're absolutely right. Then you've got to just reach out to whoever will listen. And I reached out to a lot of people that I never heard back from. Of course, that's just it's a numbers game.
That's kind of a point of pride. We try our best to respond to people who send random messages on, every social media channel. Hey, when's that going to be out on DVD? It's even a simple kickback does wonders. Maybe people remember you a little better than the ones who never got the answer,
Yeah. I mean, it is a cool. I have that compulsion as well. Like with the punk band that I was in for a really long time, the Hex Dispensers, people ask us like weird questions. I mean, that band's been defunct for years now, but people are like, what are the lyrics to such and such? And it's like, they could Google that, find it, but they're asking me. So it's like, okay, I'll copy and paste that for you. You're right. It is a point of pride of being, like real with people.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And, it's nice to connect with people that way, too, that appreciate the work that you do. And I'm sure sometimes it's overwhelming at times when there's, simple things people could Google on their own. And I know
flattering. It is. It's a good problem to have. It's a good, you can't be a prima donna about it. Like you're lucky that somebody gives a shit, right?
Exactly.
Yep. They keep in the world of art and entertainment, without the fans and without those people that are sending you messages asking for lyrics or whatever, right. We're not able to make a living doing those things.
Exactly. You nailed it.
The simplest response still gives a human connection to that person.
So I wanted to go back a bit to where we were talking about Paper Street, and kind of wanted to talk a bit about Scare Package, because I think it's kind of a unique story in terms of score, just with, working with an anthology film, and there's a variety of segments with different tones and different styles. I imagine that's a really interesting challenge for a composer. How did you go about even approaching that?
I mean, it was kind of just one segment at a time. And it just kind of, Aaron and I talked before I got started, and we had all these grand ideas about how this would all work together. And then the rubber hit the road, and it's just every group that I would work with. And sometimes I'd be working with a couple of them in tandem. For part of it, for about half of it, I was working with two different teams at once. But sometimes it would be just one. And you just take it. I got the brief from him initially, and we're like, okay, this is how we're going to try to thread it all together. And mostly the wraparound was kind of the, serve that function. But I tried, as we went, I would try to refer back to maybe a certain instrument that I'd used in a previous one, or a specific kind of synthesizer sound. If it was appropriate, I would kind of bring it back around. But yeah, everybody kind of had their own ideas about how they wanted to do it. So I had to do some gymnastics creatively, but it was super fun, and everybody was a blast to work with. So ultimately, it was kind of an overwhelming thing at first, but it's like any big project like that. You just eat it one bite at a time until it's gone, and that's kind of just how it had to go.
What was the first feature film that you had done the score for?
The very first feature I'd done was a film called A Bad Idea Gone Wrong, and it's a comedy, weirdly. But it's a guy, Jason Headley, who's a really kick-ass director who has done lots of comedic shorts, but we met doing advertising work together. So we'd done tons of ad campaigns and stuff together, TV spots and whatnot. And so I still have done some short film stuff with him here and there. But that was my first real, like, full-blown sign a contract feature film score.
Nice.
Very different from my horror work, but a lot of fun. Yeah. It's a real rock and roll score. So it was in my wheelhouse. But not horror at all, but kind of darkly funny.
But yeah, I'm just looking at kind of your filmography, and that was back in 2017. So you've been busy then in the last 3 years. Yeah.
Well, I mean, Paper Street's kept me pretty busy. Short films, pop up here and there, but those tend to go a lot quicker. But the features they're quite an undertaking.
And you're coming to us from Taylor, Texas, which apparently is 5 feet away from the train station.
Yeah, I can hear the train. I'm sorry.
It's all good.
Yeah.
Hey, we've had dogs cross through in our podcast. We've had a screaming child. It's okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of trains. I'm pretty convinced that there's an engineer that has an ex-spouse that lives in Taylor, and at night they really lay into the horn when they're passing through.
Right.
I don't know, see, ex-husband or ex-wife living here, and the engineer.
We'll thank the train for this beautiful segue. Yeah. Speaking of Paper Street keeping you busy, and speaking of trains, you've also stayed busy with us working on something we'll be talking about in several upcoming episodes here. You did the music as well for us on The Pale Door, which folks are going to be able to see rather soon. We'll have some more information on that in the coming weeks. But that seemed like possibly a new challenge for you only because of the Western motif, yeah?
Yeah, but I kind of, I love spaghetti Western stuff. I love Ennio Morricone, Sergio Leone, and all that stuff. We kind of didn't go at it from that sort of spaghetti Western pastiche. We went different roads with it, but the idea of doing a horror Western has been tantalizing to me since it was first pitched. I mean, I could not wait to sink my teeth into that film. And it was, man, I'm really happy with it. I'm really happy with the whole thing. I'm stoked. The score came out pretty good. I'm pretty bad at criticizing my own work, but I'm really happy with this one.
No, you should be. I'm not going to lie. It elevates the film. I can say that in all sincerity.
It all works together. The whole thing is, I'm really stoked about it.
I can't wait to check it out. I'm going to be honest with you. One of my questions that I had jotted down for you was going to be, how much Ennio Morricone did you listen to while prepping for The Pale Door?
Quite a bit, but it was weird. It took like we wanted to go a different route. The film starts out more of a traditional Western and just didn't want to go pastiche with it. It felt in 2020, it just felt to do spaghetti Western pastiche just felt like it wouldn't be as serious as we wanted to go with. It would feel more fun than we kind of meant for it to. It just was it was a weird fit. There is some spaghetti Western-ish kind of textures in there for sure, because you can't avoid that when you're doing something, that's got so much Americana kind of baked into it.
What he's trying to say is it's all electric guitar like the Young Guns movies.
No.
He went the exact opposite way.
No, there is a lot of electric guitar in it. There's a lot of baritone guitar. There's a lot of instruments used in spaghetti Western music. And there's, other people might notice more spaghetti Western in it than I maybe intended for it to have. But it's kind of a weird hodgepodge of stuff. We were referencing a lot of like the weird mid-period Tom Waits kind of clangy bangy textural stuff. And that's something that I was listening to a lot to get in the mood of this kind of real, stumbly, grumbly, clangy, bangy kind of percussive sort of vibe,
Yeah, as you're describing it, of course, I haven't listened, so I don't know what I'm talking about. But it kind of reminds me a bit of like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre score or Ravenous or something, where there's a lot of that clingy, tinny sound, and some of that, like in Texas Chainsaw, was used through like recording household objects being scraped against things. That kind of texture is. Yeah.
Yes, there's a lot of like weird found percussion stuff in that film score. A lot of like clacking. I clacked like antlers and bones and stuff together, and I sampled a lot of stuff, clicky clacky kind of stuff for when it gets into the the more supernatural stuff.
Using the technical terms there, the clicky clackies.
The clicky and the clacky, yeah.
All of which, if Alex's Instagram is any indication, he has fully on hand at his house because he's got wild collections that I'm envious of.
Yeah, my wife and I run a vintage antique booth here in Taylor, and we're big like collectors. We have a lot of taxidermy and just kind of weirdo. We're kind of the like aging hipster sort of Addams Family hybrid home decor school.
Oh,
Was that a
no,
word
oh,
salad?
that's perfect. No, I know exactly
You
what you
painted a
mean
picture.
somehow.
He basically said they're the Dark Shadows family if they were Foley artists. That's what their house looks like.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of a weird collection of stuff.
Cool, cool. So like eclectic macabre is
Yeah,
what it sounds
yeah,
like to me.
for sure.
That's awesome. Do you like scavenge antique shops or do you just like find things at garage sales or?
Yeah, we do. I mean, we haven't done any of this for quite a while.
Wow.
Wow,
Yeah,
what's
nobody's
going on?
done anything
Yeah.
for quite a while.
Back when the world was sort of normal, yeah, we would go to estate sales and we go to flea markets, and we're always hunting for unusual stuff for our collection and to sell in our antique booth.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
And you have that train you can rob all the time that comes by.
Yeah. Jeez. It's like the ocean now to me. I'm so used to it,
Oh, I grew up near enough one that, yeah, it'd stop waking us up after a little while.
Yeah, I also grew up near the train tracks in El Paso, and so it's weirdly comforting.
Well, for me, my house is right below a major flight path because, in Seattle, the airport's actually pretty close to the city, unlike a lot of major cities' airports are actually pretty far outside of town.
Uh-huh.
The SeaTac airport's really close, so, and my house is right by a flight path. So whenever we film short films here, it's like the constant hold for plane. Go. Oh, nope. Hold for plane, everybody. Back to one. Just over and over again. Although you can't hear it now as much because I'm in my basement, which helps.
Yeah, I'm actually upstairs. We live in a 2-story old, like 100-year-old house, which is why we moved all the way out here to Taylor. But it's worse up here because it's more of a straight line to the train from upstairs. Downstairs, I don't hear it as bad.
Sounds coming over the trees too. Yeah. No, it's not disruptive. It's I'll just patch it in the whole show. We'll just be so steady people will forget about it.
Yeah. I'll record it with a field recorder and send it to you, and you can just have it looping constantly.
There you go.
There you go.
Perfect.
You said your house is 100 years old. Wow.
Yeah.
Any signs of hauntings?
No, we so
Aww.
I know we're both a little bummed about it because we're big ghost fans. So when we were moving from Austin to Taylor and we decided that we wanted to buy this house, we ran a diedinhouse.com search on it, which you got to do when you're buying an old house.
Yeah.
So no, nothing came up. No meth labs, no murders, or no. But if somebody had died of natural causes here, it wouldn't be on that report. It's only if there was a criminal report.
Right.
But yeah, no sign of any of that, unfortunately.
And you moved all the way out there.
I know.
You guys keep talking about it like it's 80 miles from the city. It's not that far.
No, it's not.
I don't have a good sense of Texas geography. I'm sorry.
People do talk about it like it's forever away, but it's a 30-minute drive out of Austin proper.
Yeah, downtown's about 50 minutes, though, from here.
I was trying to be nice because Austin traffic's so bad, but I'm
Right.
saying take the 130
Yeah,
down the
you
side.
can get to North Austin in about 35 minutes.
Yeah, you get rural real quick, though, getting out of Austin.
Yeah,
It doesn't take
5
long.
miles in every direction.
Yeah, it feels very different. Suddenly.
You're reminded that you're in Texas the second you leave the city limits.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly.
So, Alex, I think I prepped you ahead of time, but if you're good, we're going to try this Rapid Fire 15 with you, which I equate to people as kind of like James Lipton's Proust questionnaire on Inside the Actor Studio.
Oh,
Just
okay.
not as French and pretentious, more tailored to your tastes.
Okay.
It's the lowbrow version.
Yeah, the lowbrow version. As horror is often just, deemed by people in punk rock. It's like, has to elevate to match, the standard, but that's all bullshit on the genre podcast where we're trying to dispel those myths.
Yes.
All right,
It's
lay
the
it on.
crust punk version.
All right.
Oh, okay, cool.
Feel free to pass. Feel free to elaborate. We don't hold too steady to the rapid fire aspect of it, but whatever comes to mind first, we'll take it.
Okay.
Yep. All right. First one. What movie do you think you have seen the most in your life?
Whoa. Weirdly, 9 to 5.
So not the answer I was
Because
expecting.
when I was a kid,
Not
I
a
played
punk
at a
answer.
dollar theater near where my dad worked. And so I would just go see it. It was, just kill some time while I'm waiting for dad to finish working. So I saw it. Yeah, I've seen it. I don't know, 10 or 15 times maybe. I think I exaggerated it when I was a kid and bragged that I watched it 15 times. In reality, it's probably like 8 or 9. But
Right.
you know, that's a lot for that movie.
It is.
I still think that song's a banger, though. I like it.
Yeah, I mean, Dolly Parton, man, come on.
Tumble out of bed and stumble to the kitchen. Pour myself a cup of ambition. I know the words to it. I don't know how. But
You're going to karaoke that sometime, Sean.
we'll talk later about karaoke. What's a film that you know is kind of universally regarded as bad, but you still unabashedly love?
Ooh.
Not a guilty pleasure, just one you know is bad, but you don't care because you love it.
A bad one that I like, that I still like watching. You know, the Ed Wood stuff. I mean, it's kind of obvious to go with like the Ed Wood films because that's kind of their whole thing, right? But you know, they're fun. They're charming.
There's a charm to them.
Yeah.
No wrong answers here.
So I don't know, something along those lines. I'm kind of blanking beyond that. I'm going to think of this after the interview's over. Of course, I'm going. Oh shit! I should have said blah blah blah.
It's hard. Yeah. It's hard to do this on the spot.
I guess that's the point of it, right?
Yep. Exactly. For us to watch you struggle. That's the joy in it for us.
That's the joy, right?
Yeah. All right. What is your favorite horror movie franchise?
Horror movie franchise. I guess Nightmare on Elm Street has the most in it that I've gotten the most. Yeah, I guess Elm Street maybe, but it's pretty lukewarm pick. You know?
Hey, it's mine. It's been picked on the show before. We've had a whole variety. People have said Friday the 13th too.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I kind of came to Friday the 13th later, weirdly. And the Nightmare on Elm Street was like the first sort of slasher series that I got into when I was younger. And so I guess I just have nostalgia for like the time in my life that I watched those the most and like the people I watched it with. So it's probably not so much about the films as it is, you know.
Like I said, don't think too hard and don't beat yourself up over them.
That's why it's your favorite. We didn't ask you what you think the best is, right? It's
right.
Favorite. It has usually a favorite implies like some sort of nostalgic value, at least for me when I think of my favorite films. That's why they're hard to replace. So with new films, because, you know, you have that connection from when you were younger.
Totally.
And how about your favorite horror movie subgenre?
Well, I mean, I tend to like horror sci-fi. But that said, I'd say Alien. I'd put Alien up there with the previous question, all the Alien films. But those kind of move from genre to genre as they go, don't they? My favorite horror is supernatural stuff, more than like killers or slashers or, you know, like human monsters. I like monster movies, but I really, really love anything supernatural, like ghost, paranormal stuff. But I especially love horror because I love science fiction a lot. I'm a big sci-fi head. So any horror sci-fi kind of overlap, I'm usually just, I can't wait for that stuff, you know? I'm super, super into dark sci-fi or horror, straight up horror sci-fi.
Right, same.
Okay, then you'll probably like this next question. What is your favorite John Carpenter movie? He blends all the genres, really.
Yeah, I mean, my favorite John Carpenter score is The Fog, but that's not my favorite movie of his. I don't know. The first Halloween is just burned in my mind. It just freaked me out so bad, you know? The first time I saw it, like it was just... So again, probably not his best, but it's the one that kind of sticks with me story-wise. But yeah, score-wise, The Fog for sure. I really love that score.
No, like Becky said, that's why we say favorite instead of best, because it's harder.
Right.
Really, It's really talking about your taste when you say favorite, because we can argue all day what the best is. But there's also no wrong answer with John Carpenter, in our opinion.
Well, true.
Except maybe Memoirs of an Invisible Man, but I still like that one. How about, do you have a favorite Alfred Hitchcock movie?
Rear Window or Vertigo? I guess it's a tie.
Yeah, I mean, those are both awesome movies, so it's kind of hard to choose.
I mean, I think Psycho is the one that, you know, that your mind jumps to first, but I think it's great and I love it. It's a really great movie, but I think Vertigo maybe. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. Just as easily say name an Alfred Hitchcock movie.
Yeah.
Name the first.
Well, that will be our next version of this. We'll just be like, name every single Alfred Hitchcock movie.
Chronologically, please.
Yeah.
Right, favorite Universal monster movie?
I collect Frankenstein's monster stuff, so yeah, I love any Frankenstein stuff. I mean, the original, of course, Bride of Frankenstein, like I love all of those.
One of my favorite tragic characters of all time.
Yeah, for sure. Yes. He's, the heartbroken zombie, right? Like it's just such a sad, such a melancholy character. I love it. I love the render, Boris Karloff in the makeup it's just heartbreakingly sad to me. It's such a beautiful image. So yeah, that's why I collect so much Frankenstein stuff, because I just love the black and white shots of him like in the makeup. So yeah.
Who would you say is your all-time favorite film director?
Oh God, man, that's tough. I couldn't pick a favorite film director.
We're moving to music next, so hopefully.
I can't pick a favorite. I mean, I like all.
Well, maybe whose filmography you think kind of might rest above others in your brain?
Well, again, not the best, but I've been a big David Lynch head most of my life. So, but there's some clunkers in that repertoire as well. But yeah, I mean, I guess I've been a fan for such a long time. David Lynch, I just think he's a fascinating person. Besides being just this visionary guy, he's such an interesting creative. He makes music, he builds furniture, he does all this. Really, he paints. He's just such a weird, this freaky Renaissance man.
Yeah. No, I agreed. He's almost more fascinating than his movies sometimes, just hearing him talk about his movies.
I mean, God, I love the shit out of so many of his movies. And Twin Peaks is just forget about it. So yeah, I mean, there's cooler answers than that, but I don't know.
Alan's just taking this harder than he needs to. It's okay.
This is big deal shit, buddy.
No, it's true. I mean, our tastes, it's hard to put your taste out there sometimes. It's not as safe as just hating on stuff. We've talked about how annoying and tired that can be and cynical from people. It's a bolder move to say what you do love and what you do like.
Well, my next question was going to be, who's your favorite film director that also whittles wood? So I think we know that answer.
Yeah.
I'll scratch that one off instead. Let's go for, what's your all-time favorite punk rock record? Sorry.
There's no way.
Or name a couple that come to mind.
Seminal albums to you, I guess.
Weirdly, so Mania is a collection of Ramones singles, and that was the first time I really immersed myself in the Ramones. So I actually didn't have a proper Ramones album before I got this collection that came out like in the late 80s of, just all their singles from all their albums. And so that one really sticks with me. And then, I don't know, Legacy of Brutality by the Misfits. Man, it's a long list. So there's so many, just like, those are really like kind of generic answers. There's like way more interesting answers that are eluding me right now.
I get it. For me, growing up, a lot of like the best of or like compilation albums were how I was introduced to some of my favorite bands. So
totally,
like, even though they weren't like the proper album, and I get it, like an album is like tells a story, so it's maybe unfair to pick and choose songs from a whole discography, but that's just what I think of when I think of certain bands, like Deep Purple. Like when I was introduced to them, it was all through a compilation of their greatest hits. So that's just, in my mind, that's who Deep Purple is. But
right.
I mean, we're all various ages, but our parents are the reason that Eagles' Greatest Hits was the biggest selling album in the history of the United States.
Oh, I totally had that CD.
I'm just saying, like, compilations were the norm in, suburbia. And I'm the same way. My parents bought a lot of greatest hits. So, but once you learn what albums were, and like you found a Pink Floyd record or some kind of concept album, it did change, I'm sure, all of our brains a little bit. So we'll accept the Ramones compilation.
You'll have to, because that's what I'm getting.
All right. Eventually, Alex is just going to like walk off and say technical problems because we're going to hurt his mind here.
No,
keep going. Do you have an all-time favorite film score?
A favorite film score? No, I couldn't pick one. I have a long list of film composers that I love and scores that I love, but no, there's no way I could pick one film.
Is there a top composer? That's not a question, but I guess an addendum to this one.
I don't know. I mean, it changes. It's kind of mood specific, or it's kind of, genre specific, because, that it's going to be a different answer every month because of just based on what I've been watching, Like right now, I'm really super digging back into Trent Reznor and Atticus Ross stuff because of the Watchmen score. I love the Watchmen score so much. I'm just getting around to watching that series, the HBO series. And man, that theme is just so kick-ass. And so, yeah, I'm just like, oh, yeah, well, I love this score and I love this score. I really love, I've talked about this a lot with Aaron. I love Atticus Ross him and his brother did The Book of Eli, that film, Denzel. Man, that is such a kick-ass film score. I really love it. I talk about it all the time. It's just one that
To go back and look at that one. I haven't thought of that one.
It's so menacing. It's so just like brooding and menacing and like heavy without being metal or rock at all. It's just big and heavy and dark, and I just love that score. It's really, really good. Moon, Clint Mansell's Moon. That is a phenomenal score.
Good one, yeah.
Very rock. Some of my very favorites are very kind of rock-based musicians' scores, you know. Was it 28 Days Later? Was it John Murphy? Yeah, John Murphy. I love those, you know, very guitar-heavy kind of scores. Those are really good. But yeah, Book of Eli, check it out. Don't sleep on that one. This is a kick-ass film score.
Yeah, I saw the movie in theaters and then I haven't gone back to it since then. But yeah, you have me curious. I want to go back. That movie has come up a few times in conversation lately, maybe because of the post-apocalyptic stuff. But it made me want to go back and check it out. It's a pretty okay. You know, Gary Oldman's pretty funny in it. He kind of chews up all the scenes that he's in. It's a pretty cool movie. It's not the greatest film, but it's good. But that score is just incredible. I will check it out. Okay, Desert Island Band. Do you have one? You could only bring one band's records with you to an island. God. No, I'd take the bullet. Like, I'm just gonna die. I just don't like. I mean, you know, that's not a life worth living.
That's my favorite way that a guest has said pass on the show. I just die.
Everybody held a gun. Water. You know,
smother me in these records. I will not take just a few.
If I can't take 20 records with me, I'm not going.
That's a question, not to side tangent off this, but like I always think prolificness factors in my brain to like how much I would want to take somebody's discography. You know, Beatles and Bowie and people like that have made tons of records. I feel like might be worth the while because they have more to listen to, but it's a stupid hypothetical.
Well, if it was one, I mean, you'd be smart to pick somebody like Bowie where there's a lot of variety in there, but you know, but then I'm going to miss, there's all this other stuff I would want to hear. You know, it's just, I don't know. I don't want to, uninteresting life doesn't feel worthwhile to me, you know?
All right. I have this weird sneaking suspicion he's going to have an answer to this one. Do you have, or what is your go-to karaoke song?
Oh, God. I like Jumpin' Jack Flash by the Stones. That's a fun one. Because, you know, being born in a crossfire hurricane just sounds super badass. So, yeah, that's probably it.
Wow.
That's a good one.
That was good. All right. Do you have a favorite concert experience?
Ooh. I mean, aside from, like, avoiding all the fights at my first punk show, a favorite concert experience. Yeah, you know what? So when I was a young adult, I was working at a goth club in Los Angeles called Helter Skelter, and German band Einstürzen und Neubauten, which my German's terrible, so I'm pronouncing it wrong, but Neubauten to, you know, dorky American music fans, played, and I was on the staff that would sit on the stage. There's all these little skinny punk dudes that would sit on the front of the stage at shows to keep the monitors from getting dragged into the audience, because like when Nine Inch Nails played, shit would just go crazy and like stuff would get pulled into the audience, because this was back before they were super huge and they were playing smaller clubs. So this band Neubauten, which was I had a tattoo of their logo at this point when I was 18 because I was obsessed with this band. So I got to work their show, and I was sitting on the very front of the stage, crossed legs, just kind of sitting there hunched down, you know, just stay out of the way. But it was a super mellow show, so the crowd was totally just captivated by it and super mellow. And so I realized I wasn't going to have to like wrestle with anybody to keep the monitors from getting dragged into the audience. So I was able to turn around, and so I was just, you know, sitting right there front and center in front of one of my favorite bands of all time at the time. And they did this great. This is kind of a long story, and I apologize. They were notorious for having set the Palace in Los Angeles on fire in one of their shows because, you know, they're an industrial band, and so they're very avant-garde and whatnot. And they'd done this thing where there was gasoline or something, and the curtains got set on fire, and the show had to be evacuated. This was years before that, so there was kind of a notorious thing that had gone down, and, you know, people talk about it. And so Blixa, the singer, who's also in the Bad Seeds, and Nick Cave in the Bad Seeds, but he's the frontman of Einstürzen und Neubauten, and he had a gas can, and he walked out onto the stage and poured it all over the stage. And me and the other guys that were sitting there we're getting splashed with it. And we're like, what the fuck is about to happen? And he pulls out, this like strike anywhere match and strikes it. And very dramatically, he's a total showman, drops the match onto the floor and it just extinguishes. And, the crowd is gasped, all at once when it happened. And he grabs the microphone and says, "It's Volta." and everybody breathes a sigh of relief. But, me and the other scrawny little punk dudes on the front of the stage were pretty scared that we were about to get set on fire. But it didn't smell like gasoline, so it kind of, the realization came to us. But that was, and then the show itself, the music, it was just so wonderful, and to be that close and had an unobstructed view of this band, that was easily my favorite concert experience ever.
That's a good one.
That was a good story. Yeah, that was great.
So, as a performer yourself, what's a dream venue that you wish you can or could have performed at? It could be existing now, it could be extinct, like CBGB's. Is there something on the list? I
don't know. CBGB's is one of those places where when you go to it, after the lore and everything, it's kind of disappointing when you walk in. But it's, it's got a lot of history. No, I don't, honestly, I've played some of my favorite venues because as far as playing live, like playing punk music live, it's not a big grandiose thing. Like, I don't want to play in front of a shitload of people. That's not kind of the point of it to me. I've always been more about writing the songs and recording the albums than playing the shows. The shows is something that I feel like I have to do. I know other people come at it the other way, where it's all about like, connecting with the audience and being, and that's not me. It's about the music. And so playing live has just never been something I care that much about. Writing music and recording music is my real love. So when it comes to playing shows, like, I could kind of take it or leave it, to be honest.
No, fair enough. So no bucket list time or place you'd want to?
No, I've gotten to play some of my favorite. There's a really notorious punk club in Europe and Belgium called the Pits in Kortrijk. And it's tiny. It can only fit like 30 people, but it's just this legendary. It's been around forever, and it's such a clusterfuck playing there. And it's so crowded and sweaty and terrible and miserable, but it's the most fun. Like, it's a notorious punk club because, like, the urinals are just in the room when you walk into the club. Like, when you pay the door guy, you make eye contact with somebody using the urinal. Like, it's that big of a dirtbag club. And it's just this, I'd heard about it so many times. So the first time touring Europe that we got to play there, I was just thrilled to have experienced it. And so that was probably one of my favorite venues. And this place, Vera, in the Netherlands, it's sort of one of the best places in Europe to play. It's just they take really good care of the bands. The sound is really good. And they have a band apartment upstairs where it's really clean and it's really nice. And the audience there is really enthusiastic and a lot of fun. So I've gotten to play some of the places that I'd heard about from other touring bands. And so that kind of checked those boxes for me.
That's awesome that you kind of already have those checked. Not a lot of people can say that. So
yeah, but a lot of other people are like, I'd love to play, Madison Square Garden or some shit.
Sure.
I could care less about doing that.
I get it.
It's not my bag.
No, I totally get it. All right, one last question. So I know things are starting to open back up, so maybe you've already done this, maybe you haven't, but what is the first restaurant you're going to go sit down and eat at after all the social distancing and quarantining is all over?
Weirdly, so Kura, which I don't know if they have them in Seattle. I know they have them in LA. It's a revolving sushi bar, and it's just cheap, and it's kind of, it's not fancy sushi at all, but it's tasty and it's fun just because it's the conveyor belt, and it reminds me of places that I went to in Japan. So my wife and I are really sad that we haven't been able to go there in a really long time. Because, you sit down and you just keep grabbing food off the conveyor belt as it's going by. And it's a lot of fun. So we miss that place a lot. It's in Austin. But yeah, it's probably going to be next year before we even think about setting foot in a crowded indoor space again. We've been hiding out bunkered here in Taylor.
Right. So, let alone a conveyor belt. A style restaurant, which probably has even more involved. It's pretty clean the way they have a setup where it's pretty sanitary the way they've got it all set up. It's kind of ingenious, actually, with these little latching plexiglass things over each plate that lift when you pull the plate out and whatnot. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, also Texas being a place where people aren't really taking masks or social distancing all that seriously. hence the surge that we're experiencing right now. So I think it's probably going to be even longer for us before we get to do stuff like that, because I think this is going to drag out a lot longer than it needed to because of these short-sighted assholes.
Yep, I know, it sucks. It's kind of like you think of children, right? Like, have you seen the experiments too, where they're saying, okay, if you can have one piece of candy now,
Yeah.
or if you wait, you can have 2 pieces of candy instead. So do you want 1 piece or 2 pieces of candy? And so many kids are like, I just want the 1 piece of candy right now.
Yeah.
So it reminds me of that mentality of, it sucks now, you have to wait now, but in the long run, it's going to help so that we can return to normal sooner. But it just felt like people, in various parts of the world, they took it more seriously than others, but it felt like, especially in a lot of places in the US, people took it seriously for a little bit, and then they're like, I'm just kind of done with this.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. And the candy analogy is, I think it's a bullseye. I think you're absolutely right. Unfortunately. But
yeah,
here we are.
Here we are. Are you able, like, everybody has a different circumstance with their work and their professions and different challenges during this time. Luckily, I think, for Sean and I, we've both been able to do a lot of work remotely. And for you, with a lot of film scoring, I would think that a lot of that you were doing kind of remotely anyway.
Yeah,
how is it impacting you?
I'm in my studio. I work from home anyway, and my wife is a catering director for an Austin restaurant. Sorry, I keep saying my wife. My wife, Elise, who was a bandmate of mine for many, many years. We have a band called Eerie Family that we do now, but she was in the Hex Dispensers with me, and we've been collaborators for a really long time. But she's a catering director for a restaurant that's doing kind of, pickup only stuff in Austin. So she's been able to kind of, they've reduced her hours. But she's been able to do some of that from home, and she's about to do some freelance proofreading gig for the next couple months. So yeah, I mean, we're kind of being able to work from home, so that's not a problem. It's just, and we're introverts by design, so we're happy to be home. Like the isolation's not the problem. I kind of enjoy it, actually. It's just that I just toggle between frustrated and heartbroken so frequently now, looking out at everybody and everything else. It's just so sad and maddening all at once.
Yep, I feel that.
But to her question, it does sound like you're able to stay busy because of the nature of your work, and hopefully
well, I haven't had any like paying work kind of since this whole fucking thing started, to be honest. But luckily, having worked on advertising stuff, I've had a couple royalty payments from BMI that have, I'm just kind of eking by on those. So I was kind of secretly hoping that people were just entering post-production right around the time that everything was shutting down and I could grab something, but, nothing came my way. So any people listening to this that are in post and need somebody, I'm wide open. Holler at me.
Right. We know so many people that were in limbo or midway through a shoot or like right at the end of pre-production, and so much stuff is just on hold right now. So
exactly. Everything's in a weird limbo. So yeah, it's just thank God for royalties right now,
Yeah, and anybody from Paper Street will give a very glowing testimonial to this man as well if you need it. So we know we'll work with him many more times in the future as well. So, yep. No, you will. Don't worry.
So where can people find you online then? Like, if they want to reach out, professional inquiries, or if they just want to follow you on social media or something?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter, Alex Cuervo. So ELALEXCUERVO is my Twitter, and I'm on Instagram. You can go to alexcuervo.net and spectrostatic.bandcamp.com and eeriefamily.bandcamp.com. And I guess that's it. I can send you guys a list of that stuff. So
no, we'll definitely link to all that stuff in the show notes for sure.
Cool. Right on.
And Alex, thank you so much for taking the time with us here today. And hit him up for sure if you need any kind of film scoring. If your movie is in that state or in any form of post-production, he's a great collaborator. He does incredible work. He's well-rounded in the musical stylings if you need. Don't think he's limited to just punk or just synth or just any type of genre. He can go all over the place, as he's proven with Pale Door and other things for us. So
that's very kind of you to say, Sean. And thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
And I meant it.
All right, so now you can go back and kind of torture yourself thinking about all the questions we asked you.
Oh, I'm good.
Yeah, just text us all those extra records and other things you remember at 3 a.m. this morning when the train wakes you up suddenly. You're like, why did the train suddenly wake me up?
It won't wake me up. It'll lull me to sleep, in fact.
No, but this time it will, because you're going to realize that the whole world is shut down, and that's the Snowpiercer train just making cycles around everything.
Oh yeah, I'll wake up at 4:30 a.m. and be like, God damn it, I should have said.
Or the ghost that died in your house of natural causes will suddenly make itself known.
Yeah.
And be like, you didn't say this album.
That would be the most boring ghost, though, don't you think?
Well, maybe. They might have a reason. Probably
for sticking
boring,
around. Yeah.
Hold on, I'm coming up with a sketch idea here about the most boring ghost. It just nags you about the most mundane things.
There you go. That'd be a fun one to.
And it will be scored by Alex Cuervo.
Yes, sir. Indeed.
.net. All right. Thanks, Alex, again.
All right. Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.
All right. Take it easy.